Matt Miguez has plenty on his mind, and he's ready to share it with the world. It's time to hear the Miguez Mindset.
Happy Friday and welcome into the Miguez Mindset here on ESPN 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 Lake Charles. The New Orleans Saints officially put a bow on their 2023 season the other day with Mickey Loomis's end-of-season press conference. Talked about a bunch of different things, from the development of Trevor Penning to the team not meeting their expectations to comparing Dennis Allen to Hall of Fame coaches. But anyways, we're going to talk about all of it with our guy, Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. He was at the press conference, so we're going to get his thoughts on that, plus talk about the potential OC candidates for the New Orleans Saints after they let Pete Carmichael go. So here's that conversation with our guy, Ross Jackson, the host of the Locked On Saints podcast. Joining me here on the Miguez Mindset is Ross Jackson, the host of the Locked On Saints podcast. Ross, really appreciate your time, my man, as always. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful, man. Glad to be here with you. Thanks so much.
So let's dive right into Mickey Loomis's end-of-year press conference. It kind of puts the bow on everything each and every year for the New Orleans Saints. One thing that really stood out to me was how adamant and enthusiastic Mickey Loomis seemed to be on a lot of different topics. Just give me first your overall thoughts on what he had to say in that hour-long press conference.
Yeah, I mean, he had to run a marathon with us for sure, but you could feel his energy without a doubt. And I think that that's something that's really interesting because the day before that press conference, there were all of those kind of rumors that maybe he'd be stepping aside or even moving up, and then Kai Harley would become the general manager and everything, which he poo-pooed that idea. He's not going anywhere. And, clearly he shows up with this kind of rejuvenation, this energy, this enthusiasm for who, what the New Orleans Saints are going to be here in 2024. And I think that says something. I think that it says something that there's a big challenge that's ahead of this team. They have a lot to fix. They have a fan base to basically try to win back over. And despite all of that, he's still pretty excited about what's ahead of him. So you can kind of feel that energy. And I think that's a good place to be. Is it going to reap rewards and benefits? We won't know that until this time next year when we're talking again, Matt, but it's definitely a good starting point as opposed to maybe being a little bit more maybe cynical or concerned about the future. So I was all about where he was coming from. We'll see if it pans out into some of the opportunity that lies ahead. We'll see if all that pans out into improvement going into 2024. I think that's got to be the end all be all in terms of whether or not this is going to be a successful run in 2024.
Now, Ross, the quote from Mickey Loomis that's been getting thrown around a ton is when he compared Dennis Allen to Chuck Noll, Tom Landry, and Bill Belichick, 3 Hall of Fame coaches, or Bill Belichick's a future Hall of Famer, I should say.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? Do you agree with that assessment that, Dennis Allen's still a good coach? It's just going to take time. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but
sure. No, it's okay.
Is that a fair comparison?
No, 100% it's not. It absolutely is not. And that's not even about Dennis Allen. That's about Chuck Noll. That's about, Bill Belichick. That's about those guys. Like, sure, you can probably cherry pick, 15 different coaches that started out with, tough seasons to open up their coaching career that became Hall of Famers. But then you could pick out probably about another 40 to 50 that did and didn't, right? That started off rough and finished rough and everything. So I don't think that the comparison is fair, because I also don't think that it's right to put that amount of expectation on Dennis Allen either. I don't think that anything about what Dennis Allen has done in New Orleans or previously in Oakland says that he's on the trajectory to becoming a Hall of Fame head coach. Doesn't mean that he won't, but the odds are that he's not. The odds are that most head coaches are not going to be Hall of Fame head coaches. Otherwise, what's the point of a Hall of Fame? But I get where Mickey Loomis was effectively coming from. Like, if I try to stretch it a little bit and try to see the perspective of it, I understand the value of patience, I think, is the thing that he was really trying to drive home, that this is an organization that's always been patient, right? Like, if the Saints would have moved off of Dennis Allen after this season, Dennis Allen would have become the shortest tenured head coach in New Orleans Saints history on just 2 years. And so I get the idea of trying to say, here's why we're having patience. I don't think that using Hall of Fame head coach starts to their career was really the way to go about it, especially when you aren't taking into an account effectively 5 years as opposed to just 2 years. It's not just his time in New Orleans. He had the time in Oakland as well, which does carry value and does carry weight. So I understand what Mickey Loomis was trying to do there. It wasn't the greatest look. I don't think that it worked the way that he expected that it would work, but I do get the value of patience. And certainly this organization has shown time and time again that it is the epitome of that, a patient organization. And they're not going to rush to make rash decisions. I think that's the point that he was trying to drive home, which would have been better served by simply driving that point home as opposed to leveraging or evoking the names of these Hall of Fame, and in Bill Belichick's case, future Hall of Fame coaches.
Now, the thing that's really interesting with what you just said is, you know, obviously the point that he was trying to make, like you said, is the having patience with a new head coach. And but again, kind of going back to him wording it wrong, incorrectly, whatever phrase you want to use. This isn't Dennis Allen's first head coaching job.
Right.
For Chuck Noll, Tomlin, that was their first head coaching job. So, like, you understand struggles right off the bat. But I guess the question that I have is, at what point, if you're Mickey Loomis and the New Orleans Saints, do you say, okay, we have enough of a sample size here? Like, basically, how short is Dennis Allen's leash going into 2024, in your opinion?
Yeah, this is his last chance. This is his last chance. And the thing about it for Dennis Allen is that it's not just his last chance with the New Orleans Saints. By NFL historical standpoint, typically this is his last chance as the head coach in the league. You don't usually get a third chance as a head coach in the NFL. And so this is a really important year for him. I don't think that New Orleans would cut bait with him during the season unless it's a catastrophic start to the season or it's catastrophic midway through the year. But a lot of the guys that Mickey Loomis was using as a reference didn't get fired after going 0-4 with the way that that Dennis Allen did in Oakland in his third year. You know what I mean? So the comparison is not fair, in my opinion, to Dennis Allen. It's not an accurate comparison for the expectations that we should be having around him or that fans should be having around him and things like that. I get, going to bat for your dude and everything like that. I respect that 100%. 100%. That's exactly what Mickey Loomis should have gone up there and done, no matter what. But just the framework, I don't think was as effective as maybe he had hoped that it would be.
Right.
And so I think that going into 2024, like you have to look at it as the last chance for Dennis Allen. Last year, he got the opportunity to revamp the defensive coaching staff. He got his quarterback. This year, he gets the offensive coordinator that he wants and all that. Like this kind of is the last straw for him. So I would say that the leash is about as long as 17 games will take him. But if there's a catastrophic downfall at any point, that's certainly something that's going to spark some conversations.
Now, it's always a double-edged sword in the offseason when members of your front office are being requested for interviews for GM jobs at other places, because that tells you that, we have a good operation going here, right? But at the same time, you want to keep those guys in your building. So if you're Mickey Loomis and the New Orleans Saints, how do you keep guys like Kai Harley and Jeff Ireland in the building?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you have to be able to sell what it is that you're doing and hope that that provides more than the advancement opportunity provides. But the fact of the matter is that, like, if Jeff Ireland gets hired by the Chargers, who he had an interview with on Wednesday, if Kai Harley gets hired by the Carolina Panthers, who he had an interview with earlier this week, those guys are probably gone because advancement should be their number one priority. And if you don't have internal advancement available to you, then you don't really have a way to compete with that. And the Saints are not a team that usually blocks or tries to, dissuade, those advancement opportunities and everything. So I don't know that there's really anything you can do. I don't know there's necessarily anything that you have to do. I think the fact of the matter is simply that if they get the advancement opportunity and that's what they want, that's what they're going to take. And so your priority as an organization has to be who's behind them, who's next, who are the people that are good enough to step up into that role. Do you need to open up an external search? Whatever it might be. It sounds like New Orleans is pretty confident in guys that are behind Ireland and Harley. So if they do get hired away, they have somebody that could step into that position with organizational familiarity.
Right.
But I don't think that you're going to be able to convince those guys to not take a promotion with another team.
Now, Ross, another thing that Mickey Loomis pointed out yesterday that was really interesting is the development of Trevor Penning.
Hmm.
And talking about how, the team didn't do Trevor any favors because he spent most of his rookie season hurt. You threw him in. You started him week 1 this year in his quote unquote rookie year. And really just kind of hindered his development there. Is it too early to say that Trevor Penning's not going to work out? I think it is.
Hmm.
But that's been the conversation. Trevor Penning's a bust. Trevor Penning's not going to be a first round quality offensive lineman for you. And then the second part of this is, do you think he's a better fit at the tackle spot or maybe more interior in a guard spot?
Yeah, considering he's never played guard and he's never played on the interior in his playing days, I would have to say right now that he's a better fit at left tackle. We'll have to see, or at tackle. We'll have to see if that changes, if he gets the opportunity to play on the inside, cross train, stuff like that. The Saints do that all the time. But as we sit here right now, I would have to say that he's a better fit at tackle because it's the only position that he's played,
Right.
right? So to assume that he's going to be better on the inside is kind of projecting something that we have like no evidence for at all. So it would be tough for me to make that argument. But when it comes down to whether or not he's a bust or whether or not he is going to pan out, we simply don't know. Like we got a handful of games of him in 2023 to evaluate before he was benched, and then never got the opportunity, whether in a jumbo role or otherwise, really to show any type of development out on the football field. And I do agree that the Saints didn't do him any favors. In fact, to an extent, I'd argue that they failed him. Especially by benching him and especially by not letting him get back out on the football field, because how else is he supposed to develop
Certainly.
and everything? And so, I think that that's got to be a big thing that they're working on over the course of the offseason. First of all, for Trevor, he's got to stay healthy this offseason. And therefore, get the full training camp experience, get the full mini camp experience, all that, get ready for the season, and then hopefully be the starter at left tackle week 1. If he stays healthy, but can't turn enough opinions or turn enough heads to the point to where he does become the starter week 1, then I think you start having the conversation about him being a disappointing first round pick. But until we see that and until he gets a legitimate shot, I don't think I can sit here right now and say one way or another whether he's going to be good, whether he's going to pan out, or whether he is a bust. We won't know that until we actually see him get an opportunity again.
What major roster changes do you see coming soon for the New Orleans Saints? I mean, do you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the offensive line's a big one that we're going to continue to watch, because maybe it's a change at left tackle with Trevor Penning. We'll see what happens there. Left guard is definitely a spot that you're going to be looking at. What happens with Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle? I mean, there's a lot there to kind of figure out, right? Especially if Trevor Penning can't be the starter at left tackle, then what does that mean for James Hurst? Does James Hurst move out to tackle? Is he at guard still? Like, which way do they want to go with that? So really the only two people I feel like you can solidly say as of right now are going to be starters week 1 on the offensive line are Eric McCoy at center and Cesar Ruiz at right guard. Outside of that, I don't know what to expect on the offensive line as we speak at this point ahead of, Senior Bowl, free agency, draft, all
Right.
that. And then the other thing that I think you're looking for is some of the veteran players, or are rather some of the veteran players. What is Michael Thomas's future, if any, in New Orleans? What's going to happen with Marshawn Lattimore, with that restructured contract that sure looks like it was restructured in order to at least show that they were open for business, even though I think it would be a bad decision to trade him, because it's not like you made less dead cap in
Right.
that situation. You're still going to have it if you trade him. So I think that that's probably the other kind of biggest things to watch is, who are some of those 30-plus-year-old players? Who are some of those players that have been around in the Sean Payton era and everything that maybe get moved on from this offseason if the right opportunity presents itself, as this organization tries to turn over a new leaf and then sort of develop its new era and new future.
Now, Ross, one more thing that I want to get to is the interviews of offensive court or for the vacant offensive coordinator
Mhm.
position. 3 names so far: Tim Painter, Zach Robinson, and I'm drawing a blank on the Seahawks offensive
Oh, it'd
coordinator.
be Shane Waldron. And then,
Thank
and the
you.
first one is Dan Pitcher
Dan
over in
Pitcher.
Cincinnati.
That's what it
Mhm.
was. Okay, so out of those 3 guys, rank 1, 2, and 3. Who would be your choice, second choice, third choice for the Saints OC?
Yeah, at number 1 for me is Zach Robinson, the quarterback coach and passing game coordinator from the Los Angeles Rams. Number 2 would be Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator from Seattle, and then Dan Pitcher, the quarterback coach from Cincinnati, would be at number 3 for me. That's the way that I would rank them. And look, Dan Pitcher being at number 3 doesn't have anything. That is not me saying that he's a bad hire. All 3 would be outstanding hires for New Orleans. They're all part of the Sean McVay coaching tree.
Right.
Dan got his exposure to that tree through Zach Taylor with the Cincinnati Bengals. The other 2 guys worked directly with Sean McVay. All 3 would be outstanding hires, just to be clear. But I do think grabbing the guy that's coming from that system that you got an up close and personal look at just a few weeks ago, and that gave a top defense in the New Orleans Saints defense a ton of problems. A guy like Zach Robinson, who can come immediately from that, who just worked with Matthew Stafford, pair him up with a not terribly dissimilar guy in
Right.
Derek Carr, I could see a lot of success in that. So Zach Robinson tops the list for me.
Ross Jackson, the host of Locked On Saints, joining us here on the Miguez Mindset. Ross, before you run, man, tell our listeners what's happening on Locked On Saints the rest of this week.
Yeah, just keeping you up to date with everything going on with the New Orleans Saints, and of course, this very entertaining offensive coordinator, search. We're going to be taking a look at that. We're going to hear from some of our Rams experts here on the network about all 3 of the guys and why hiring from the Sean McVay coaching tree is a good idea. I'm going to go over some offensive coordinators at the Saints, some offensive coordinator what's the word that I'm looking for? Candidates that the Saints should avoid as well. So we got a lot coming up over on Locked On Saints, trying to cover this from every angle possible, and of course, keep you up to date with the latest news as well.
Ross, appreciate your time as always, man. Enjoy this craziness. Senior Bowl and free agency are right around the corner, and then it's the combine and the draft, and before you know it, it's the season. So keep your head on straight, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Take care. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you here soon.
I want to take this time to thank Ross for joining us. You can find him on YouTube at Locked On Saints. Also, make sure you follow him on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. We'll be back next week to talk more about the Saints, plus LSU football getting some big changes as well, and the college football landscape just turning complete 180. We haven't had the chance to talk about Nick Saban's retirement yet. So we'll do that and more next week on the Miguez Mindset. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Follow us on social media at ESPN_SWLA. And I'll be back next week with more of the Miguez Mindset here on ESPN 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 Charles.